Hi, everyone. Welcome to Anderson Ranch. I am Andrea Jenkins-Wallace. I am the Artistic Director of Photography and New Media. Welcome to our summer faculty lecture series. I want to welcome all of our virtual participants as well as our Board of Trustees and National Council. We want to thank you for your support. Tonight we will be hearing from two artists, Sharon Harper and Susannah Lee. So Sayler, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. Aster's laughing at me. Sayler. It says Sayler, I don't know. Sorry. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones. Anderson Ranch acknowledges also that our campus resides on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Ute people, who call the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Through our mission to promote a wide range of arts, cultures, and voices, we commit to partner with and honor the indigenous ancestors and residents of this sacred land where we work, learn, and create. Our first artist is Sharon Harper. Okay. Sharon is a lens-based artist. Her work is in the collections at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the Denver Art Museum, among others. She has received a Guggenheim Fellowship in Photography and residency fellowships that include Yaddo, the Headland Center for the Arts, the McDowell Colony, the UCross Foundation, among others. And her monograph, From Above and Below, was published by Radius Books. She is a professor of visual art at Harvard University. Please welcome Sharon Harper.
Doing? Good. Woo! Just have to get going here. Okay. I really want to thank Andrea for that introduction and also for inviting us here. I'm teaching a collage class with Susannah, Sayler, and we couldn't be more supported and more delighted to be here. Esther has done everything under the sun that could be done, except for what could be done by the miraculous interns who are also here, that we very much very much appreciate. And I also want to thank Emil and his crew over in the Fab Lab, because the kind of equipment that's available here and the kind of things we can do is kind of incredible. So anyway, because I'm teaching a collage class, I'm going to present the ways that I consider my work in photography and video to be collage adjacent. This is my word. There are ideas that arise in collage that I see as fundamental to my own interests, although I don't think that people would really think of my work as collage. As an artist, I've worked at the intersection of technology and perception for over 20 years, using the camera to explore our invisible ties to the world around us. As I read about other cultures and their relationship to the land, it inspires me to explore our unseen connections to the environment that are undoubtedly real and profound. It's always struck me that it's an accident of birth that I have the worldview that I have, and I find many other beliefs resonate and feel important. So in this series, Moon Studies and Star Scratches, I photographed on the same sheet of a large format transparency film for months at a time. This layers time and places on top of one another. The image has a collage-like quality in the way that it's comprised of over 70 exposures. Time and space are displaced from one another and are layered on top of each other. This photograph is one of the first images from the series that I made during an eclipse of the moon. When I saw the image, I could see that it recorded the phenomena of the eclipse, but it also recorded the movements of the camera and the photographer from that 3-hour period of watching the eclipse. When I saw this image, I wondered, why not chart the movements of the moon over the course of a month while it waxes and wanes? I began to photograph for extended periods of time on a single sheet of film. In the images from the series, the moon links our understanding of time in terms of a monthly calendar with the celestial realm where the time is measured in terms of light years. The camera here, I consider a partner in the recording process. It impacts the record it keeps, which is ultimately a visual dialogue transcribed by the image maker and the camera together. This relationship can be seen as a metaphor for the ways that technology affects and ultimately facilitates our understanding of our surroundings. So long exposures of stars used in some of the images also explore time. The exposures combine an understanding of time embedded within photography. A 4-hour exposure of a star renders on film a line of light so many inches long, with the fact that starlight hitting the film is light years old. These images are an attempt to record a realm we can hardly fathom within a framework of time we can readily understand. These images are made with a 4x5 or an 8x10 camera. I was moving the back of the camera after each exposure, hoping that I would use the entire sheet of film like a drawing on a piece of paper. I was interested in tracking certain elements in each image and opening the process to a dialogue beyond my control. There are places in the process that I relinquish determination over the composition, for instance, and then places where I make decisions about what to include in the image, how long to make the exposures, what time of night to go out, how long I continue to make exposures on the film before I send it in to be developed. I'm tracking some things and leaving others to chance. I'm making decisions while I'm shooting that have to do with what the images look like, what the night is like the evening that I go out, and how I can work with different visual ideas in different conditions and in the recording process. It's a process that, like improvisation and jazz, there's the opportunity for spontaneity, which is built upon a longstanding practice and familiarity with photography. So I want to jump to another project. I'm going to jump around a little bit, and then I'm going to land where a little more recent work. But I want to jump to a project called Sun Moon, Trying to See Through a Telescope. We can't look at the sun directly or know the details of the moon's surface without a mediating instrument. This project explores the impact cameras and optics, those of a telescope, have upon an image and examines the limits of seeing. These images are comprised of these images are tiled together with a time date stamp on each image to indicate its order in the sequence. These combined images can be seen as tangential or a precursor to collage. They rely on sequencing and refer to the early motion studies in photography that Edward Muybridge made of horses and other moving bodies. All of the images are visibly impacted by the telescope in the camera. Visible distortions and reflections from inside the telescope appear within the image. I love this aspect of photography, that actually the instrument really does impact the materials that are used to record. Each attempt here to capture and look at the physical object is frozen for scrutiny with a time date stamp that you can see on this one. Yet the motion recorded is not of the object, like in Muybridge's studies, but it's turned back on the camera, and it is charting the time that the camera took the image. These sequences suggest an understanding as a cumulative act in which the ideal of the moon and the sun remains elusive. What we're left with is the act of trying to see and to understand. This image is from the day moons. You may recognize that the moon rises and sets in the day at certain parts of the month. So this is an image made at the oh, okay, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. This is actually in October, a waning moon that was kind of copper because it was so close to the horizon. This is from a different series of work. It's called Watching the Sunrise Over the Grand Canyon for 1 hour. There's a problem when trying to photograph something like the Grand Canyon that's iconic. We all instantly have a picture in our minds of what the Grand Canyon looks like, but when we try to photograph it, the light shifts over it and changes the color of it minute to minute. When I think of the Grand Canyon, I think of red rock, but that's not what I saw when I was photographing it. The grid implies that there's no beginning and no ending moment for this kind of change. This piece edges toward collage by presenting time as an ongoing aggregate rather than discrete moments. It also, of course, presents images in proximity to each other as a comparison as multiple images within a single image. So after working on 12 years on celestial phenomena and thinking about cosmic time, I turned to the Earth and focused on geological processes, both slow and faster processes such as earthquakes and landslides. In Yosemite and Kings Canyon, I was immediately struck by the fact that these large, inert boulders once rolled over or fell into place. Within these images, I added layers in post-production to separate them from the scene in which they existed and to emphasize their individuality. I show these images sometimes as individuals, but also iteratively as a color grid and as a black and white grid, as seen here, where you see each iteration brings out different formal qualities in the work. So phenomena that shape the land can happen offstage, so to speak. What one's left to contemplate is its aftermath. Carved canyons, strewn boulders, desert washes that leave tangled debris behind. Photographs within the series are grouped entitled according to the phenomena that shape them, such as rockfalls and river canyons in the prior group, or the desert wash in this group of works. The group of work that I've developed that they all fit into is called Some Observations on Movements of the Earth, and they're records of precarity and agency within the land. In the desert, there are two most common ways to die that you all out west might know, but were really surprising to me. So, not too hard to imagine that people die from thirst and dehydration in the desert, but the second most common cause of death, anyone know it? Flash floods. You guys are Westerners. Flash floods, that was a new one for me. It's really dramatic. So the desert periodically, of course, has dramatic and sudden flash floods that leave all the debris scattered and twisted around tree trunks in the desert wash, and I was kind of fascinated by that phenomena of the aftermath. So this is the first series that I ever really made actual collages and used a laser cutter to cut into the images and then start layering them in ways that I thought were sort of resonant or mirroring the way that there are these tangles in the desert wash itself. So this is actually work that I've never shown anywhere for any reason, but it struck me as very collage-like. It's in Nepal, and I want to read a short passage from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who self-describes as a mother, scientist, decorated professor, and enrolled member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation in a chapter of braiding sweetgrass, She talks about animacy in the land, and she says, "This is the grammar of animacy. Imagine seeing your grandmother standing at the stove in her apron and then saying of her, 'Look, it is making soup. It has gray hair.' In English, we never refer to a member of our family, or indeed to any person, as it. That would be a profound act of disrespect. It robs a person of selfhood and kinship, reducing a person to a mere thing. So it is with the Potawatomi and most other indigenous languages. We use the same words to address the living world as we use for our family, because they are our family." I'm really interested in this notion, too, that in indigenous languages, that you capitalize rock, leaf, tree, in the way that you would capitalize members of your family's names. In another passage of someone else who I think about, it's the eco-theologian and cultural historian Thomas Berry's book, The Great Work, Our Way into the Future, which is an old book, it's 1999. He describes the great work for us now, which he says is for all humans to be present to the planet in its mutually beneficial manner. He talks about how trees, plants, rivers, oceans all have rights, and that human rights do not supersede these rights of the living environment. In these images of Nepal, I think about the agency of the land. I think I'm thinking about that because of the scale, which is something that is really present in collage, the ability to shift scales dramatically. And these buildings in Nepal seem so small next to the big boulders that are falling next to them. Okay, so I'm gonna shift to some moving image work, and actually gonna start with a piece that I made in Japan called Tree Grow Forest Community. And I'm just gonna play a clip, trailer of what is a 15-minute piece, but it is related to collage, as I think you'll see. I'm gonna toggle here. Oops. Okay, and this has sound too, so hopefully we'll get that going. This is just 2 minutes. It's not playing. Okay. I did toggle. Oh, I got it. I'll stop. I'll escape from my presenter. Okay. Excuse me. Got it. Okay, so this is just a 2-minute trailer from a 15-minute piece. Vimeo. Hang on, let me try something here. We were talking about how this happens with Vimeo. I want to finish by playing one more piece that I've started working more with water. Not surprising, I guess. I've gone from the sky to the ground to water, and this piece is called Gathering Light. It was made, it was played in the Williams Chapel in Harvard on Earth Day, and the three musicians who were playing live asked me if I would create something for this. They wanted to play a piano trio called Ravel's Piano Trio, and when they asked me to do this, I decided to record from the solstice, June 21st, to the equinox, and I filmed everything facing up to the light, so I called it Gathering Light. I was also thinking about perspectives that aren't really human and how to capture those. There was a lot of organic elements of the music we felt when we talked about it, the musicians and I, and so I focused on this wilderness community area in Vermont that I frequent. And I commissioned a software engineer to help with, we attach certain aspects of the video to certain aspects of the music, and then it was randomly selected, the video, but there was some plan within the chaos. I planted the certain kinds of video could be at certain parts of the score so that there would be these different kinds of correlations, but that when the piece is played, the video would never be edited the same way twice. So I'm just gonna play a piece, like a 2-minute clip of this, a trailer, so there's some fades in and out, it's not contiguous, and I'm gonna end with this. Okay, Vimeo. Thank you very much. Might want to turn the lights down when Susannah speaks, because I think it made me really nervous to have it quite so bright. It may just be my own personal preference, but thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Our next artist is Susannah Sayler. She works with a variety of media, including photography, video, collage, and installation, and is often in collaboration with others to deepen our understanding of ecology and the poetics of relation. She was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2023, and she teaches at Syracuse University, where she co-directs the Canary Lab. Please welcome Susannah Sayler.
A little computer switcheroo here, bear with me. Looking good, so far good. Okay, thank you. Good evening, and I also want to express my great thanks to Anderson Ranch for having Sharon and I here. This place is incredible, and our staff in the photography area are incredible. So Esther and TAs Seth, Kaylee, Sarah, and Conrad, thank you so much. So it was a real pleasure to follow Sharon. I know that our work has a lot of in dialogue, and I was reminded of that. So I think there'll be some themes that develop here in this second part of the evening. Just a quick note on authorship. Since 2005, I have worked almost exclusively in collaboration with Edward Morris, and so I author my work as Sayler Morris, and I often will use the pronoun we in reference to my collaborator and I. In my creative practice, I seek to deepen engagement with natural and social ecologies, defined not only as the relations between living things, but also as the relations between various histories, myths, and ideas in a given place. Photography is my primary medium, but I also work with video, collage, and animation. The products of my research vary in form, but all attempt to represent the complexity of factors that shape and affect the landscape and the environment. I need my glasses. In my last several projects, the places I have engaged with have been as much allegorical as geographical. The American West, the Amazon, a poet's garden, and a river at the heart of American colonial history. Such places occupy a space in the broader cultural imaginary. As a young photographic artist, and I think I have this in common with one of our students this week, I was interested in capturing scenes where the presence of humans is felt, but not seen, and where a violent undercurrent lies beneath a placid surface. The impulse was connected to a sense that artists could represent and make felt the invisible forces shaping our lives. In 2005, after reading Elizabeth Kolbert's chilling book on global warming, Field Notes from a Catastrophe, the focus of my work shifted to the unfolding ecological crisis. My collaborator and partner, Edward Morris, and I set out to design a project that would photographically mirror Kolbert's text, a multi-year photographic project titled A History of the Future. It's a series of large-scale landscape photographs taken in places around the world where scientists study the impacts of climate change. In starting this project, I had activist motivations that have been present in my work and publicly engaged work since. Later, I would appreciate the term hyperobject that philosopher Timothy Morton gave to the climate crisis, meaning a thing with real force in the world, but so massively distributed in space and time as to defy a simple representation. A history of the, actually, I forgot I had this slide in here. So in thinking about representing the climate change impacts at that time, you know, I did a lot of research, scientific research, and was often encountered with images like this, which represent our changing climate, but I think are so difficult to kind of comprehend and feel. And this is probably familiar to many of you. It shows the tracking rising temperatures with CO2 in the atmosphere. And about the time that we started this project, actually, Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was in the theaters. It was a film that was to awaken the public's consciousness about climate change, and was incredibly successful. It actually did very well at the box office, considering that it was Al Gore giving a PowerPoint lecture, literally. But there's this moment in the film where he goes up in a cherry picker. There's a very large graphic of this image, and he's a big guy, and he's always wears suits. He's vice president, and he goes up in this cherry picker as it tracks this line as it rises, and and he's kind of awkward. He's on a cherry picker, and it's to demonstrate, I think, and the audience is kind of giggling nervously to see this happen, and then he makes this this incredibly serious point about CO2 in the atmosphere. And I thought it was so brilliant because he's precarious, and he also appears small in comparison to this line. So it's a great moment in the film. So these are some images from A History of the Future. So the History of the Future and subsequent work were also inspired by a desire to understand what role art has to play in revealing the many facets of our ecological crisis and the intense representational challenges they present. These challenges have various origins that include the simple fact that geologic time unfolds at a scale very different from human time frames. When out in the field photographing landscapes being radically but slowly transformed, I found that I was often met with silence. The placid surfaces of images with violent underpinnings that I sought out in graduate school. The representational challenge was how to express the potential trauma and violence under the surface of these placid places impacted by climate change. Working in areas demarcated by local experts, usually scientists, and wanting to make pictures that reflected my experience in the landscape, the strange silence I encountered, I photographed whatever made me feel and believe that change was truly beginning, that the history of Earth is long compared to the short history of humans, that unimaginable forces of nature are constantly changing the land, that this thing referred to as a climate change impact translates into suffering, that seeing the past is seeing the future. In short, I photograph what in the field in real time seems to manifest not just the facts of the ecological crisis per se, but its trauma and uncertainties. A History of the Future was my first long-term project dealing with place and the ways that human history and geologic history collide. In my subsequent projects, I have become increasingly in-depth in my engagement with place, and have become to think of myself as a somewhat so-called artist historian, to borrow an idea from Matthew Buckingham. At issue is Ursula Le Guin's warning that unless the past and the future are made part of the present by memory and intention, there is, in human terms, no road, nowhere to go. How exactly do we bring the past into the present? How does that alter our sense of self? And why is the artist important in this process? I believe that the methods of the artist are well adapted to the task of this type of cultural production and empathetic reimagination of history. So not long after we started A History of the Project, we also launched something called the Canary Project that was it was sort of a platform to produce art and media that deepen public understanding of climate change. And it came out of this sense that, out of a sense that perhaps our work wasn't as activist directly as we might like. And so we wanted to work with others and collaborate on a variety of projects that might have more direct messaging or message in a variety of ways. And so over the years, we produced over a dozen projects, working with hundreds of artists, designers, educators, and scientists, having many different roles, from collaborator to producer to fundraiser and so on. And these are just a few of the projects. This is one I'm very fond of. We worked with a couple fashion designers and made these dresses out of, they had been men's dress shirts. And the project's called Increase Your Albedo. Albedo is a measure of the Earth's reflectivity, is an important climate change concept. So the performers would wear these outfits and go to public events and try to talk to people about climate change and encourage them to increase their albedo. This is Eve Mosher's High Water Line, which is a project where she drew a line in chalk 70 miles around Brooklyn and Manhattan, showing the combined impacts of sea level rise and increased storm activity. Poet and critic Maggie Nilsson talks about when artists make work about the environmental crisis that is unfolding every day, we are holding grief for species and the world as we know it. During the pandemic, life slowed, and I realized that this narrative was becoming overwhelming. And I needed to figure out how to make a sort of mental but also aesthetic shift and to create work that was about coexisting, working locally, and possibly the possibility of making new things possible. So at the same time, we were having conversations with a supporter of the Canary Project about this need to kind of shift our metaphor, the canary in the coal mine, which is a metaphor of warning, to something that we would feel would be about doing, tools. So we we decided to wind down the Canary Project, and we started this project called Toolshed to gather and share tools to empower individuals and communities to live ecologically that would have a focus in the Hudson Valley in New York, where we live. And Toolshed actually has a tool library, which really doesn't have a lot to do with art, but we have also a collection of books and objects in the public library. We do workshops and so on, and then have this editorial site with essays. So getting back to my work, I actually have no idea how I'm doing on time, but hopefully okay. So while photography is usually the starting point for my work, I've become increasingly, interested in other media, including animation. Eclipse was my first large-scale animation piece. It was a piece that I did at Mass MoCA, commemorating the now extinct passenger pigeon. And it was made in dialogue, again, with Elizabeth Colbert, but another book of hers called The Sixth Extinction. So I'm just going to kind of zoom forward now to my most recent project, which I just completed a couple months ago. In 2019, Ed and I spent 4 months in Ecuador with our son, doing field work in the Amazon. We chose the Ecuador because I was attracted to the country's constitution, which affords certain rights to nature and natural entities. Looking back, I was beginning a shift, I guess, in my outlook that was described very beautifully in Tim Morton's book, Dark Ecology, where he articulates 3 sequential phases of ecological awareness. And if you've read Tim Morton, you know that his work is it's about like very serious topics. It tends to be full of kind of humor as well. And so he lays out the phases of ecological awareness as grief, bewilderment, and love. And he says there's no cheating, you have to do them in order. As Maggie Nelson wrote in reference to coping with climate despair, one must move through negative affects and not around them. So by this logic, you can't really get to profound ecological bewilderment without going through grief, and you can't really get to profound ecological love, meaning a feeling of intimacy and care with your fellow beings, small and even sentient and non-sentient, without going through bewilderment. And bewilderment is what the Amazon made me feel. So this book was very influential to me going there. It's a book by an anthropologist, and it's just incredible, for me, was an incredible rethinking of consciousness and how forests think and how creatures in the forest think. So the Crystal Forest is a body of linked works, photography, collage, and video, that consider how to represent the Amazon in light of its multiplicity of refracted meanings. As a space, the Amazon is mosaic-like, loaded with symbolic meaning, but also a real inhabited place. One day, while photographing in the Yasuni Reserve, I went out in the forest accompanied by a Waorani woman as a guide. She sang the entire time at home there. She said the name for different plants and demonstrated their uses, like a palm frond she brought over, explaining it was a roof. My perception of the place and the multitude of life forms there shifted, creating a sense of productive disorientation that occurred at other times when I was alone in the forest. The body of work that developed from my Amazon fieldwork is titled The Crystal Forest. For this work, I began to use collage as a means to blend archival images with original photographs to convey the complex mediations by which a place acquires cultural significance. Source images for this series include original photographs, typically the background image, and then in a later series also the foreground images, or shot on a 4x5. And then the source images for this series came from botanical archives and also National Geographic photographs. I was interested in the history of exploration as recorded in National Geographic. So these are a few of the images from that series. One of the reasons I wanted to work with collage is I didn't quite know what to do with my images of the jungle because the jungle is like, it's like very chaotic and I find difficult to photograph. And I felt as if also it has a kind of opacity that it didn't quite feel right to represent it without some kind of mediation. And so kind of putting something right in the foreground kind of felt like a right move at the time. So that series is called Manifest, and this is the second series called Edifice. The work circles around a building we encountered on the edge of the jungle, a bizarre melange of architectural styles where trees break through concrete floors, blue mirrored glass captures the sky, plants grow in a faux Corinthian columns, and jaguars made from ceramic tiles guard the entrance. This building inspired the title, The Crystal Forest. The title also references the Crystal Palace built in London in 1851, which I can get into later if we have time. So the building is actually the remnant of the Escuela Superior Politecnica Ecologica Amazonia in Tena, Ecuador, part of the ambitious 1997 endeavor to create a network of universities across the Amazon that would educate people who live there, including indigenous people, in fields like business management and computer science. The project quickly failed, and the jungle quickly started overgrowing the buildings, reabsorbing its remnants. So currently the project consists, well, not currently, because actually the project's done, consists of these 2 series of collages, some large-scale photographs, and a film titled The Amazon is Elsewhere, which mediates on the unknowability and power of the Amazon for those who do not live within it. For many, the Amazon symbolizes the lungs of the earth, or nature itself. But for indigenous people of the region, many of whom have no separate word for jungle or forest, it is home. Amazon is Elsewhere contains scenes that were made. This is an installation shot of Amazon is Elsewhere with another one of our animations called Prophecy of Butterflies that was installed at the Can Factory in February. So the Amazon is Elsewhere contains scenes that were made with AI that express forces at play in both the building and the jungle that are difficult to parse as being malevolent or redemptive. At this moment, there is something untamed and wild in AI, like a child who is yet to be socialized to say the right thing, to smile in the right way. At the same time, as a metabolic force, it seems akin to global capitalism. For these reasons, I was interested in using AI to generate images that are both somewhat monstrous but also unexpectedly beautiful. I'm also interested in AI for aesthetic reasons and what the tool has to say about the human relationship to technology and consumption. So if I have time, I'll play a couple minutes of this video. Is that okay? All right. Let's see here. See if Vimeo will. See. I'll try your trick, Sharon. I stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was wonderful. We are going to have Q&A, so if you have a question, Esther has a mic over there as well. And if you just raise your hand, we'll come to you, and we're going to have Sharon and Susannah come just up front here. And have some questions.
I'll turn the light off.
I'm so happy I got to listen to your artist talk. I have a question for each of you. For Sharon, seeing photography is so beautiful. I have kind of a two-part question. Is there a target audience that you make work for or toward, and what do you hope people walk away from your art thinking about? I've always thought that the work should be experiential and should be available to everybody. So I think it's a reality that there is an art world where a lot of it is shown, and that's the audience that encounters it. But I really have always, I started as a documentary photographer and photojournalist, and I really am interested in viscerally and perceptually engaging people so that everybody can engage with it. So that's what I think in terms of audience. Thanks for the question. And I have a different question for you, Susannah. It's inspiring seeing the amount of people that you've worked with.
Talk about climate change is very wonderful. I'm curious, within all the different bodies of community that you've worked in, if you've experienced any pushback in terms of talking about climate change, or if you've listened to different perspectives that may not agree with what your art is trying to talk about.
That's a great question. I think that for me, the time when I was most sort of flummoxed was when I've encountered people who don't really believe that the Earth's older than 6,000 years because they believe in creationism. And so it's impossible to talk about climate change really in geologic, so having to address a fundamentally different conception of time based on religious views is just something I'm actually not prepared to do. And I've been in a couple situations where that's come up, and I just have really had nothing to say. I wasn't really able to deal with it. But in terms of sort of climate denialism, I've been surprised that in fact I found more dialogue than I would have expected. More openness. I remember once being on a residency in Nebraska, and we were invited by it was one of the local clubs that they had monthly gatherings, and a lot of the town's kind of leadership was there. The manager of the Walmart was there, people who were important in the town. And, and I was really, and we gave our presentation, and I was expecting kind of pushback that people just be but there was a real actual openness to dialogue that I appreciated so much. And it made me just feel like this is where I wish I was doing a lot more work, because there was just, people wanted to talk, so, yeah.
Hi. Oh, well, that was loud. Sorry. Sharon and Susannah, thank you for your talk. I had a question for both of you. When I started reflecting during both of your talks on how environmentalism and climate change is so abstract, even though we're living through it, even though we can see the effects, the whole concept is abstract, and it made me reflect on the abstraction and the collage that you're using in your own works. And I'm curious, and it kind of it goes in this different direction other than direct documentary. And I'm just really curious about how that functions for you, or why you moved in those directions, especially in, you know, the bifurcated images and experiencing both of those in real time, and also the AI-generated images or the collages where you have human architectural works in the Amazon and they're put together. So I just want to hear a little bit more about that from both of you.
The move to collage felt very logical at that time for me. I think I was also, I've been working in this very traditional genre of large landscape photography for a long time, and I wanted to be able to be more of a studio photographer, or work at. I have more of a studio practice. You know, I wanted to. I guess I wanted to travel less after I went to the Amazon and COVID happened, and I wanted to be more locally focused, and so collage gave me a way to work through ideas without necessarily going to places, and it also felt appropriate for a lot of the ideas that I wanted to express in that project. You know, so the National Geographic projects that reference this like long, incredible, rich photographic history of exploration, of going like to outer space and underwater and like, you know, seeing like the wonders of the earth. They're like riches, you know, in a way. And so I wanted to, you know, there's some kind of critique of that, I guess, but I also think it's an amazing tradition, photographic tradition. I wanted to reference that. And for me, like collage, which I'm fairly new to, just, it gives you so much ability to kind of express complicated ideas, you know, in a way that I just really enjoy. And in terms of AI, like to me, it feels related to collage because, like, as you probably know, AI functions through these by basically metabolizing all the images on the internet, or you know, initially they were data sets of images that were fed to it and it learned from, and so on. So in a way, it's like, you know, chewing up images and like making these creations. So it feels, as Sharon likes to say, collage adjacent.
That's such an interesting question because I never think about the affect of abstraction. I think about what the viewer's experience is of something, and that if the viewer has to engage their perception in order to it's like an invitation to the viewer to participate in making sense of something. So if you have a series of images, it's the space between those images where the viewer's imagination is brought in. If you have a collage, the viewer's imagination, like with Dada or Surrealism, has to come in and start decoding these symbols, and in that sense is invited in their own experience and perspective. And I think that's been the mode that I've worked in. You know, that's the most interesting thing to me, is how can you make a still medium like photography engage people's perception and visceral experience?
Thank you both so much for those incredible presentations. I was really, really attracted to this idea of materiality feeding into like your complex relationships, both of you, with place and time and presence in those places and times. And so I was wondering, like, how do you think about materials and materiality? I think you both mentioned you shot with large format cameras, and, you know, currently without the need to do that. Like, how do you think about materials and materiality and trying to convey these like complex relationships with time and place?
I love the materiality of photography. I think that a lot of times, because it is understood very broadly in culture at times as a window into reality, that we forget that it's mediated through materiality. Even a digital camera is mediating through optics and through, so I love picking up different materials and different cameras and film or digital, whatever tool that's gonna change the project. So like when I was using a telescope, for the first time I used a digital camera with that because I could attach the digital camera to the side of this stand-up telescope. And then I had no idea what I was looking at. One day I have the whole piece that's a grid of the sun, and I thought I was looking at this bright disk, it's the sun, I was so excited. And I got inside and downloaded, and I had been looking on the digital back of this camera. It was just the light bouncing around in the mirror at the bottom of the telescope. And I love that because that's why I called it trying to see through a telescope. Like, because it's just this act of trying and trying to understand, and how do we know what we understand from something? It's always this process. So the materiality I'm always fascinated with, and in different papers, and not matting something and floating it off the wall. And I've tried all these things that sort of go against the cultural norms of photography to try to see what photography, the potential, what's possible, because I think the medium itself is so exciting and so plastic. It's like almost limitless what could be done with it. And yet, going through school in photography, it was such a constrained idea of what photography could be, you know, and the MoMA idea of black and white, matte it, this, you know, is it made by the artist, is it, and so I really honor that tradition, but I also really was pushing a lot against it. So I'm fascinated by materiality. It doesn't always show up in my work, but sometimes that is the focus of the exploration.
So I work with a lot of different media, but I really feel like photography is the foundation of my practice, and unlike Sharon, I really just like to work my 4x5 camera. And it's the same one I've had for a really long time, and I should probably replace the bellows. But I love it because it's slow, and I love the physical experience. Well, I don't always love the physical experience because there's often horrible conditions like spiders and humidity and all kinds of things that you have to go through. But you engage in the world physically when you're making landscape photographs, and then you wait around a lot, because you're always waiting for the light, or you spend an hour going somewhere and then you realize that the light isn't right and that you have to come back again, and so it's there's all this waiting, and then eventually you have this, as the photographers in the room probably know, you have this moment of oneness with your landscape, that's for me akin to a religious experience, and it only happens with this ridiculous camera that I lug around with film. I can barely get any more. I'm trying to use a digital camera, but I don't like it that much. So.
Any more questions? I think we have time for one more.
Thank you both so much for your presentations. I have a question for the both of you, actually. Both as working educators and artist with a studio practice, I'm wondering how being an educator, and specifically an art educator, influences or even possibly hinders your own studio practices.
You've got the mic.
Okay. So I had a year off from teaching. I had a year-long sabbatical, 2023, 2024, and it came after I think I'd been teaching full-time in academia for about 12 years. So I had a moment to kind of a real before and after moment there, and I, teaching is so engaging mentally. It's so stimulating, and of course it can be frustrating too. But I found that I really missed it. And when I got back into the classroom, it like gives me energy to work with students. And I think because like I have to explain things, I have to like think so much harder about images, that it makes me like not lazy in my own work, because you know, I have to like, you can't like stay on the surface, I don't think. And so of course like full-time, but I also like, I don't know how full-time artists do it. It feels like so much pressure that you would have to make art every single day. Like Kenny asked this question of like, do I paint on the day I teach? And I usually can't come up with the time to make work, like really when the day I'm teaching. You know, I think it also is important for me to have that time that is separate from making work.
Yeah, I love having a cyclical job. I love that it has seasons. Like I'm just coming off of being chair for the year, and I'm desperate to make my own work. And yet I come here and you all are working and you're making, and I'm totally in it with you. And I think that it's exactly right that if you see people thinking and engaging and they're asking you questions, you're thinking and engaging, that for me, making art is all about communication. It's like, I don't make it in a closet. Well, I do. In the dark alone. No, but I think it is really a drive to communicate and to create community. And so I see working with students as that. And the administrative part is hard, and that actually I can do, and I can put that hat on, but that really divides me from being an artist, and that's very wearing. But the activity of teaching and the intellectual endeavor of it, and the process, the delving into process, I adore. I really love seeing people work with ideas and challenges, and just, it's inspiring to see that kind of creativity. And I really don't believe that there are certain people who are artists and certain people who aren't. I feel it's all about coming to a place in yourself where you want to engage with that, and having the openness and the courage to do that. And there are ways to do that. So it's just kind of endlessly exciting. Thanks for asking that. That was nice. Nice way to end. Thank you all so much for coming.